can learn so much about what is going on in society through what is being read and I guess through what is being banned.
Paris is like a whore.
Oh. If you're banning a book that's kind of about this fear of the future, I mean, you're just making it worse. You're just proving
the point.
We should be very scared, and that is the point.
The party told you to reject the evidence of your eyes and ears. It was their final, most essential command. Our phones have become almost this really important...
Well, we're told not to... It's almost like don't trust yourself.
Yes.
Don't trust yourself anymore. It's the first time where Fireman Gus confronts the possibility that books ultimately must contain something worth dying for.
Do you know why that this is so important to me? Because reading is rebellion. Hello and welcome to the Bibliofilles Podcast. I'm Chaya.
And I am Sophie. And first of all, we'd like to thank all of you for making the time to join us today and listen to our podcast.
Please do subscribe, like, send us your critique, your comments. We take them very seriously, let me tell you. We almost feel like you're marking our homework when we get reviews back.
I was going to say exactly that. I want a report card.
We absolutely do.
Different subsections.
We have the most tantalising and brilliant episode for you. We have so enjoyed talking about it and researching it. This podcast episode is on banned books, moral panic, and why stories terrify people. I mean, there you go. A quick thank you to our sponsor, London Nootropics. Sophie's glow is all for you.
We talk about my glow a lot, but it is actually true. I have really found that my daily London Nootropics coffee does make a genuine difference to my morning routine. I am a big coffee drinker. I always have been, but I found that 1 cup of London Nootropics in the morning makes a world of difference. And I definitely avoid those. I call them the afternoon jitters, but they're very much a thing for me. London Nootropics, it's essentially adaptogenic coffee.
Yeah.
And it is coffee. That is the key thing. There is caffeine in there because at the start I thought, what? No caffeine? But it's very much there. But there are also adaptogens in each sachet. So I like Flow, which is infused with lion's mane, and it just is really helpful for me in terms of keeping my focus throughout the day.
And let me tell you, these are the kind of products that you by mistake accidentally leave out on your coffee table anytime anyone is coming over because they look luxe. Charlotte Tilbury for coffee
is absolutely true.
Is our tag.
Yeah.
And we have a wonderful code for you, Biblio. So if you put Biblio into the London Nootropics website, you will get a very nice discount. So definitely treat yourselves.
Enjoy it.
We are so excited to also tell you about our book club picks for June because, oh my goodness, have we chosen 2 phenomenal books. One of them speaks so much to who we are. Honey by Imani Thompson, which was released on the 7th of May. I heard about this because UK rights were snapped up in the fiercest 10-way auction. Everyone was talking about it. It's already being translated into 10 languages. And for a debut, that's pretty unbelievable. Imani is a British writer with Jamaican heritage, and she has written Honey whilst working as a bookseller at Dawn. So love that for her. And it's so unhinged. Ursa doesn't intend to kill the first time, but the Cambridge professor sitting opposite has manipulated her friend and stolen her research. And when she flicks the bee into his San Pellegrino, she thinks he'll just get a nasty sting. But then he's dead. And Ursa has been bored for a while, feels alive. It's a sweet feeling finally having some control. I mean, what doesn't sound amazing about a feminist serial killer?
I reckon we're going to love that one. I reckon we're going to love it. Our older pick for this month is The Wide Sargasso Sea by Jean Rhys. And I must shout out my uncle who actually got this copy sent to me because I really wanted to borrow his, but he'd actually left it in Jamaica, where he is from. And Jamaica is a very significant part of this book. So this book has actually been described by Michelle Roberts of The Times as one of the works of genius of the 20th century. It was first published in 1966, which is actually quite late in the author's career after years of relative obscurity. So this story is actually a prequel to Jane Eyre.
Love it.
Which tells the story of Bertha Mason, who you might know as the Mad Woman in the Attic. It's set in post-emancipation Jamaica and it follows Antoinette Cosway, a Creole woman trapped between cultures, race, and colonial power. The novel explores colonialism, gender isolation, and ultimately, who gets to tell a woman's story.
And what we love about it is so slender. So you're picking up a classic and it's not going to be inaccessible or weighty. It's like a few days.
And I guarantee it's going to completely change how readers see Bertha Mason and even Edward Rochester afterwards. I think that's one we're both going to really enjoy and find very, very fascinating. And thank you to my Uncle Simon for sending me this copy.
So this episode has been percolating in our minds for a while. There was a recent article that I personally saw. There was a case in Manchester. 193 books were removed in a school library and a school librarian faced disciplinary. Why it caught my attention, and I'm always fascinated by the concept of banning books, is that the book that sparked it off, as I understand it, was Laura Bates' Men Who Hate Women. Laura Bates is a journalist and a feminist writer. The librarian went to Index on Censorship, a voice for the persecuted, and talked to them about her disciplinary hearing and the scores of books that were removed. And she talked about the fact that she has, she could see the young teenage boys and why that would be a really important book to talk to that they could pick up. 193 books removed, including, Sophie, Michelle Obama's autobiography.
On what basis?
I don't know. The Notebook by Nicholas Sparks.
Oh my gosh.
I know. AI was used to earmark these books. And actually, requests to remove books from library bookshelves are on the rise in the UK as the influence of pressure groups behind book bans in the US cross the Atlantic. And the situation, I would say, is nowhere as bad. Censorship does happen, and there are some horrific examples of librarians losing their jobs.
But she must have been so upset,
can
that
you
librarian.
Imagine? The CEO of the Chartered Institute of Library and Information Professionals talked to a lot of the media about this, but I think we're seeing the slow encroachment of book censorship. So we are going to tell you a bit about what's coming up in this episode. So we've got a bit of history of banned books just to set the scene. And then we've got political fear books and the books that expose society. And then we've got a section on when books cause moral and religious panic and the books that people think corrupt kids, some of which you will be shocked by. Obviously in there is the confluence of LGBTQI plus books that are constantly being banned. And then we think about why banned books matter.
Absolutely. And they absolutely do matter for all manner of reasons. So when we started talking about this topic, my mind immediately leapt to one of my favourite books.
Oh my God, such a favourite.
It really is. A book that I think about regularly, and I imagine as we move into the future and the age of AI, as it kind of tightens its grip around us, I think this book will become even more important, although arguably it really is one of the most important modern classics that there is, and that is Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury. And when we started thinking about this, it immediately took me back to a scene in the first part of the book, which I just think sort of says it all really. It's when Gus Montag, our fireman, so just to give it a bit of context, this is set at a time where firemen, rather than putting out fires, they are there to destroy the most illegal of all things, and that is books. I mean, it just pains me to think about it. Gus Montag, our main protagonist and fireman, never really questions his role in this until a key scene, and this really made me think. There is a point where he arrives at a woman's house ready to kind of burn her books. It's in the early part of the book. I have tabbed it amongst many other things in here. And Chaya, I can actually imagine this being us, if this were to be us. So they've arrived at this home after someone has reported that a woman there has been hiding books. And the normal practice is a person would leave the house if the firemen were there to burn their books. But this woman refuses to move. So Montag places his hand on the woman's elbow. "You can come with me." "No," she said. "Thank you anyway." And next we get to the point where she says, "No, I want to stay here." And they're counting before they start the fire. "You can stop counting," she said. She opened the fingers of one hand slightly, and in the palm of the hand was a single slender object, an ordinary kitchen match. The sight of it rushed the men out and down away from the house. And essentially, this is the moment where She's refusing to move, and she is going to light the fire herself. The point is, it's the first time where Fireman Gus confronts the possibility that books ultimately must contain something worth dying for. And I think that is so key to this. It gives me goosebumps thinking about it, but how ahead of its time and how relevant to what we're talking about today.
And if you want to think, if you don't think, because I think obviously it's happening more and more in the UK, a new report found that the number of banned non-fiction books doubled between 2024 and 2025 in the US.
To think. I would not have thought about
Pen
that.
America started documenting book bans in 2021, and there's been more than 23,000 instances on record.
Wow.
23,000.
That's a hell of a lot. I think, though, the point is that there is a lot of banning happening today. And obviously the case you brought to us in Manchester is really fascinating. I think that was the end of last year through to this year, right? But this has been going on for, forever.
Which I hadn't appreciated.
Yeah, like ancient China, there was serious book banning going on. I think there's cases going back to as far as 213 BCE when Confucian texts were burned, essentially in an attempt to control thought and ideology, which is really fascinating. Ancient Rome, that texts that were considered politically threatening were banned. And then, of course, the Catholic Church, which was a big one.
Yes, they banned something called Index Librarium Prohibitorum. They literally provided a list of prohibited books, which existed for 400 years. And writers like Galileo Galilei and Voltaire ended up censored because their ideas challenged religious authority. I think, obviously, very much prominent in our minds is the book banning that obviously became very prominent in Nazi Germany.
I think that's considered now probably one of the most infamous examples of book banning and censorship, from around 1933. Actually, there was a point where university students and Nazi officials were publicly burning thousands and thousands of books by Jewish, socialist, and what they deemed as un-German writers. So Freud was targeted, Ernst Hemingway, and also Helen Keller, who I've always had this sort of, I'm not going to say obsession, but I remember reading about Helen Keller as a child. She was blind and deaf, and I think her books were very much considered socialist, and they were banned under the Nazi regime. I also share a birthday with her. I think that's why I feel like I've got this weird connection with her. But look, these were very, very theatrical burning sessions and hugely, hugely symbolic. Actually, one of the comments at the time from Goebbels, who was the chief of Nazi propaganda at the time that this happened, he said that the age of extreme Jewish intellectualism is now at an end. And that was kind of so intrinsically linked to the banning of these books.
Fascinating.
There's a real violence, isn't there, when you think of book banning? It's so much more than just an act of burning paper. It's not like throwing something away. There's a real, I almost feel it physically when I think about it. Absolutely, of so many things.
It's interesting because J.R. Tolkien famously wrote a letter where he didn't want his book published in Nazi Germany, and he talked about how he had always respected the Jewish people. It's very interesting when you have these political situations and how they really encroach upon literature, which should be this very, very free.
So did Helen Keller.
Yes.
She also wrote and spoke out when they decided to ban her books, and it's worth looking at her letter online. But obviously, look, this was hugely associated. It's often hugely associated with, culture, politics, and, all manner of things going on at a time when a book might just be deemed as just absolutely not okay.
Because it speaks to what's going on in the world at the moment. And actually, that's the point that you can so very clearly see in the US.
Absolutely.
So we come now to our sections on different types of books that have been banned. And do you know why that this is so important to me? Because reading is rebellion.
Oh, I love that.
Reading is rebellion.
I want that on something. I know it must exist.
Merch. #merch.
Now's the time.
No, I'm serious.
Yeah. But it is.
When you're reading a book that's supposed to be subversive, I would never stop anyone reading any book. It's
not
interesting,
at all.
Isn't it?
I like to know, even if I don't agree with it, I like to know who's reading it and why.
Because there's book banning, and then there's books that we don't think should be widely available. What kind of books would we say are not widely available? I can't think of any that I would say, other than the ones that would teach someone how to hurt people. Or,
yes.
Do you know what I mean? Something like instruction like that. But other than that, it's ideas. Anything should be okay to be discussed. There are many books that we're going to be... We've got quite an interesting selection. They range from fiction to non-fiction, but And we're not going to be reviewing them. We're just going to be talking about what they represent. So
some you're totally going to know of.
Oh, of course.
Very famous.
And here are, well, I have one and I always talk about the second book together with it. So first is 1984. We both have matching copies.
I mean, mine looks a bit dog-eaten. I'll just leave it where it is.
1984 is a dystopian novel set in Airstrip 1, formerly Great Britain, a province of the totalitarian superstate Oceania. And it follows Winston Smith as he rebels against a suffocating government ruled by Big Brother, which utilizes mass surveillance, perpetual war, and psychological manipulation to crush all independent thought. Why I have a second book, which is so not as well known as it should be, is I have Julia by Sandra Newman. So Julia is a really important side character. Julia Newman actually received permission from the Orwell Foundation, from the Orwell estate, to write Julia's perspective.
And how fascinating.
And it's from a
Julia.
feminist perspective and it's brilliant. And I would urge anyone who loved 1984 to look at it. It's so good. And
Sender of the letter.
Look at my tabbies. Why was 1984 so banned? Which is so ironic, right? And it's this book that has suffused our language as well, like Big Brother is watching.
Totally. Well, I was going to say it's
Groupthink.
the book that spawned 1,000 reality TV shows, hasn't it?
So true.
It really has.
I love
Not
you.
just Big Brother,
so
but
right.
so many stem from Big Brother. This concept. I actually think it's completely spawned all reality TV shows if you think about it, because Big Brother was arguably the kind of the first really famous one when I think back as a student of reality TV. But I really do think so. And then actually, when you think back, all of the others have cut the whole concept of being watched constantly. It's come from there. It must have. I mean, Big Brother is called Big Brother, so they're not hiding that in any way. But
and
it's very interesting.
There's so many important lines from 1984 about truth and surveillance, like who controls the past, controls the future, who controls the present, controls the past, and like war is peace, freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength. And like, especially in terms of the concept of not trusting what you're seeing.
Yeah.
There's some incredibly important quotes from 1984 about kind of if you're not questioning if they make you question what's in front of your eyes, then you very quickly lose reality. It serves as the most powerful playbook against authoritarianism, oppressive governments using surveillance, autocratic regimes. And what I find fascinating, Soph, is that sales massively spike every time there's political turmoil or surveillance debate. So after the Snowden revelations, trends on TikTok whenever governments do something suspicious, people treat Orwell like a literary emergency alarm.
Yeah, I totally hear that. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So I just always find that funny because whenever we're told, oh, that didn't happen in the way that you think it did, even though 100 people have got their phones out and we've all seen the footage before anyone's talked about it, I'm like, okay, Winston, we're with you.
Exactly, we're with you, Winston. Another one in this vein, of course, is Brave New World. I've read quite a lot of, dystopia, which forms, there are many books that we could go into and we're touching on a few of them here, but Brave New World is really one that has inspired many, many of these writers. And but I actually read this. It's probably one of my most recent reads in this category. It's set in a futuristic world where the society is absolutely obsessed with pleasure, consumption, and social stability. And there's basically this obsession with like happiness. Their emotions are entirely controlled. It's all about genetic engineering. And happiness is a huge theme. But ultimately, while happiness exists, freedom basically does not. So this is just a brilliant fantasy of what the future could be like by really exploring this concept of free will and who's really in charge of us. I absolutely loved it. And really, one thing I do like, if you're watching this on YouTube, you'll see, but my copy came with these, very cool if you see the cover, but it actually came with inside those 3D glasses that you get when you go and see certain shows. And when you look at the cover with the glasses on like this, you see it in a whole different light. And I think that's the point. It's about, I guess, perception and what is reality and what does it really look like.
I love that.
And that is really at the crux of this one.
I think for me, the most important quote from 1984, which speaks so much to what's happening at the moment, is the party told you to reject the evidence of your eyes and ears. It was their final, most essential command.
And that appeared in an article that you told me about
everywhere
recently.
Because everyone's got their phones out and we're being asked to question kind of eyewitness accounts and testimony and footage. Our phones have become almost this really important...
Well, we're told not to... It's almost like don't trust yourself.
Yes.
Don't trust yourself anymore. And actually, it's really interesting because when you look at 1984 and A Brave New World, they're often compared, but they're seen in a way as dystopian opposites because Orwell feared that governments would ban information, but Huxley thinks more along the lines of that people would just stop caring about the truth altogether because they'd just be too entertained. So it's quite an interesting distinction between the books. But this one, Brave New World, was banned for sexual content, drug use, anti-family ideas, criticism of traditional morality and religion. I mean, it's all there. But with these books, it's all there. That's the point, and that's why they're banned.
And you know what? That brings us to someone that Sophie would give a kidney to, and
It's very true.
And I would do anything for as well, because The Handmaid's Tale, Oryx and Crake, Margaret Atwood is that bastion, a very modern bastion of books that spark political fear. Sorry, are we not living in Handmaid's Tale?
Yes, but that is the point. And I think really people have banned this book, but like ultimately Atwood in a way, I guess,
thrives on it.
Well, yes. And her own point is, this isn't fiction. So that's even almost more reason to ban it because it's so pertinent that people can't cope with it. But she said many a time that everything in The Handmaid's Tale has happened in some way or form throughout history. She's got files and files of cuttings that she's taken from articles over the years that just sort of prove it. Not that she's out there needing to prove it, but the point is it came from somewhere real. So, I mean, The Handmaid's Tale is possibly the most famous, I'd argue, of books that have been banned in kind of more modern times.
I could not agree with you more.
You know, and it's really very much seen as anti-religious.
Yes.
Violence as well. I mean, I feel that as you go on, you almost become numb to the violence, but I do appreciate that it is pretty gruesome in parts. But it's that combination, I think, of speculative fiction, but actual morals. And I think people are frightened by that, and they're frightened because it's actually true.
Yeah, I mean, the commentary on reproductive control couldn't be more pertinent now. I mean, every time reproductive rights debates intensify, sales of the novel surge. The Handmaid's costume becomes a protest symbol. It enters real political culture. And
Absolutely.
I think the point is that as religions and extremism kind of abounds, something like this is not so far off reality.
Absolutely not. And at different times, it just becomes more and more relevant. And we are arguably living in a time where this book is possibly more relevant now than when it was published, I think, in the 80s.
And actually, what I find really interesting is Atwood's dystopian novel, Oryx and Crake, has faced similar widespread challenges, primarily in public schools. It's been removed because of its inclusion of explicit sexual content, but also its mature themes. It was one of 13 books completely banned from all public schools in Utah in 2024. And this resulted from state legislation requiring the removal of books if they allegedly contain pornographic or indecent material. So there's this interesting dichotomy here. You've got books that speak to power that are then being banned for being too prescient or too inappropriate. It's like, well, can't they just have trigger warnings? We're all adults.
Well, absolutely. And I think that's a fascinating thing about Oryx and Crake because it actually taps into a very modern kind of fear. It's like a fear of corporate power and biotechnology and also environmental collapse, which is perhaps different from The Handmaid's Tale. But equally, it's about this future world that's devastated by all this kind of scientific experimentation. Ultimately, if you're banning a book that's kind of about this fear of the future, I mean, you're just making it worse. You're just proving the point. We should be very scared. And that is the point.
Absolutely. You know, we talk about books, and this is a podcast primarily about books and life through books, but books can be this vehicle where we confront our past, we learn to protect our future. And the section that we have now on books that expose society, which is so very much linked, and they all truly are, for me is probably the most important, because when you're banning books that explores the devastating effects of racism and white beauty standards, and you're banning books by Nobel Prize laureates that deserve their place in every single school.
Absolutely.
And yes, they might be books that are too grown up. I wouldn't want my children reading these right now, but I would want them to know about these books.
Absolutely,
and I would want
when the
them,
time is right.
When the time is right. And this brings us to one of the most frequently banned books in America. And I would beseech anyone to read it. It is Toni Morrison's The Bluest Eye. I also have The Song of Solomon here, and Maya Angelou, who I just carry around with me all the time because I love her. But Toni Morrison's 1970 debut is set in 1941. It's the story of 11-year-old Pecola Breedlove, a girl who develops an inferiority complex, desperately praying for blue eyes to make her feel more beautiful and loved. It's the most challenged book, as I understand it, in the US. It's repeatedly been censored due to its raw exploration of racism, incest, and sexual violence. The key is that it's confronting uncomfortable realities, because it is set in a time, and it's a really important context about the character and who this character is. Toni Morrison won the Nobel Prize in 1993 and a Pulitzer and a National Book Award, and she won a Presidential Medal of Freedom. There is no other writer in my lifetime that I can think of with the most important. And Toni Morrison's books are constantly being banned. Don't you find that fascinating?
Yeah, I mean, it's quite amazing to think that they just kind of go on being banned over time. It just kind of, it's...
Do you think this is something in the past?
No, but I think that's the point. It all is affected by the world in which we might be living in. When it becomes more contentious, I suppose.
Yes, very true.
In some way. So another classic that's been banned, I haven't read it. I've been meaning to read it, if I'm honest. The font is very small and the book is very big, but I am going to get there. It's The Grapes of Wrath. I've actually said this before, that I didn't know if it was Wrath or Wrath, but I'm going with Wrath. And this has been banned, I think, mainly for socialist ideas, and ultimately a negative portrayal of capitalism by Steinbeck. I mean, I'd love to read it. I just think, Steinbeck is serious, like Morrison. I mean, these are like proper, serious, big-time writers. And yeah, they're just getting banned, aren't they? I mean...
Yeah, so Steinbeck's novel about migrant workers during the Great Depression was accused of being communist, immoral, and anti-American. And in California, communities burnt copies. They didn't just ban them, they burnt them.
Going back to Fahrenheit 451.
I know. Essentially exposed exploitation and poverty. It was so controversial that people debated it in Congress.
Wow.
One book that I think has to be mentioned here is Salman Rushdie's The Satanic Verses. Salman Rushdie's 1988 novel was one of the most famously banned books in modern history. It was considered blasphemous by many Muslims for its portrayal of Islamic figures. It was immediately banned. There was no question about it. It came out, it was banned.
And he has suffered for it for many years since.
In India, Pakistan, several other countries, it triggered global protests. There was obviously the 1989 Iranian fatwa calling for his death. And what I didn't know when I was researching this was that horrifically, the murder of its Japanese translator
I didn't
in
know
1991.
that. I never ever knew that. That's shocking.
It's a surreal, magical, realist novel exploring themes of migration, alienation, and religious faith. It follows two Indian actors who survive a terrorist bombing in London, only to magically transform into the Archangel Gabriel and the Devil, launching a complex journey of identity and spiritual conflict. And his book was really this clarion call to the arts world to say what topics are off limits here. I remember reading The Red Tent, which was all about biblical characters, and I loved it. And I remember people saying that's not appropriate. You shouldn't be reading fictional accounts of biblical figures. And I was thinking, well, why on earth not?
But I think the point is, that's fine. And people are entitled to that opinion. Okay. But then taking it to another level of like outright banning the books, that's something different entirely.
Yeah.
It really is. I mean, one that I wanted to mention, I read it a long time ago.
This is so good.
It's a graphic novel called Persepolis. So this is by Marjane Satrapi, and it follows Marjane's childhood through the Iranian Revolution. I don't know if you can have a little look about how cool these illustrations are. It's all told in the form of a graphic novel, and it's just a brilliant exploration of life during this time: war, identity, rebellion, growing up under a regime in this way. I just think it is quite revelatory, and obviously hugely, hugely pertinent now, given the climate we are all living in. And it's a fascinating insight. I think, so many people, because of the form of graphic novel, they could take this and learn something. But I actually wonder if that also has made it more likely to be subject to being banned, because it is so very accessible.
That's
in its content.
So interesting. You're saying like the geopolitical conflict through the eyes of a child, but through the lens in which a child can read. Like my kids could read
my
that.
kids could totally read that and get what it's saying.
It's so interesting. We come now to when books terrify people morally. And obviously there's a big crossover here with the books that people are scared are going to corrupt their children and the religious and moral panic.
Yeah, oh my gosh.
I think what we're going to do is set out a few books that historically have caused this moral panic, which always makes me want to read them more because I'm so contrarian.
Yeah.
And then we're going to get to some of the books that have faced huge and tremendous challenge more recently. So Sophie, you wanted to bring in Lolita. I also have a copy here. I don't know whether I want to read Lolita again.
I actually love this copy. As in, I love the cover. I love how small it is. I've never read it.
Have you not?
I've never read it. And I don't know why. I think it's because, reflecting on it now, it probably is because it's so seen as so controversial, but in such an uncomfortable way. But from what I know, look, Humbert, the main character, has this obsession with Lolita, who is a child. And I think therein lies the reason why this book has ultimately been banned, because it makes for very uncomfortable reading.
Well, in fact, Nabokov struggled to find a publisher because multiple publishers were terrified of prosecution for obscenity.
And I think the point is, it's obviously been banned for these very uncomfortable and kind of explicit themes. And it was considered totally obscene when it was first published. But the fact is, Nabokov was using Humbert as a very, very unreliable narrator. He's not like sort of saying, oh yeah, I agree with you. This is a character from what I understand, he has built to kind of, I guess, illuminate this issue. I listen, I don't know enough, having not read it, but I feel that is possibly why I've shied away from it, because even I do like the dark and twisted, as you may well know. I do feel like this may perhaps be taking it into pretty uncomfortable territory, even for me. But I saying that, maybe I should give it a go. I don't know. It's considered to be, some people say it's incredibly shocking. Some people call Humbert a funny monster, and others say that it's just laugh out loud. So it's a really puzzling one to me, that one, I must say.
The entire horror of the book, but I have read it, it lies in the manipulation of language. Like, Humbert is charming and articulate and persuasive, and readers slowly realise how language can disguise monstrosity. I think it's very culturally important because it speaks to the sexualization of children and very young women and how voyeuristic society can be. It's a book that started off very much like Salman Rushdie. The premise of the book in and of itself was controversial, which, I mean, is similar to A Clockwork Orange, which is a book that is notorious for the film that's been made and for the morality of free will
and
that
the
it explores.
violence, I'm sure, for that.
That is gratuitous violence.
Yeah, totally.
Tropic of Cancer by Henry Miller. So I would be absolutely wrong not to include it. This was Henry Miller's first novel. It follows a young American writer as he makes his way through 1930s Bohemian Paris, encountering pimps, prostitutes like wilted flowers, drinks hustlers, and sexual adventurers. It was banned as pornographic and was the subject of several obscenity trials. Tropic of Cancer defied the conventions of its day and of language itself. It was very, very important. In fact, George Orwell says he knows all about me, you feel. He wrote this book specially for me.
Oh, I love that.
Obviously, it was banned. It was banned in the US for over 30 years.
Really?
Yes.
Was it anywhere else, or was it just...
Yes. Well, yes. Everywhere. It was historically significant, very much in America, but the courts eventually ruled in its favor in the 1960s.
Wow.
It's just cultural chaos. If I'm being honest, it's cultural chaos. I think Beckett called it a momentous event in the history of modern writing.
Wow.
Ezra Pound said, at last, an unprintable book that is fit to read. Orwell was, and Huxley, Sophie, all of the writers that we're talking about.
All the gang. They're all in on it.
Say that it's a bit terrifying. And I think that's because if books are the lens through life, then surely if people want to read about this very bohemian lifestyle and the morality questions that it raises, then why is that an issue?
Well, I totally agree in that actually, don't you find, well, I love that books give you the opportunity to go to places that you can't go to or won't go to for whatever reason. But through a book, you can near enough get there. So let us get there. And that means, we're not necessarily going to go and do it or whatever, but like we can travel there through a book. And that enables us to kind of really explore worlds, people, lives that we just wouldn't get the opportunity to do.
If anyone hasn't read Miller, I have read a tiny bit, but I have to just read you this passage because it shows his wit, his sardonic wit so well. Paris is like a whore.
Oh.
From a distance, she seems ravishing. You can't wait until you have her in your arms. 5 minutes later, you feel empty, disgusted with yourself. You feel tricked.
I love that. I love Paris, but that is so accurate. So accurate.
I mean, obviously there's inherent misogyny and I think these
it's
books,
just the two sides.
These books have to be read in the context upon which they've been written. Henry Miller, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of feminist critique about how he represents women. And I think, but that's the important thing, that we can have these conversations.
And you can't have the conversations if the books do not exist.
No. This is the next point where we get to the books people thought would corrupt children. I mean, the book Harry Potter has been banned and banned and banned for its portrayal of the occult and magic. And these are books that people fear will corrupt children. I mean, parents corrupt children more than
Charlotte's Web. Charlotte's Web was one of my ultimate favourite books as a kid. And I had no idea that this book had been banned until I did a little bit of research. And apparently the idea of animals talking was considered dangerous. It was considered unnatural and disrespectful to religion. So that's why Charlotte's Web was apparently banned. I would never, don't know where it was, presumably God knows where, but ultimately to imagine this book as dangerous to me seems very, very bizarre. Well, but we live in different times, I guess.
Well, we don't. I think often children's literature becomes a battleground for ideas about innocence itself. And if you're thinking about what innocence represents to parents, if you're raising children in an incredibly strict environment, then yes, anything that in any way confronts that reality can be considered dangerous. And
I guess so, in a way, isn't it? Also, parents just projecting their own anxieties. Like a child wouldn't think twice necessarily about an animal speaking in a book. Like it's just a nice story. But if a parent is so inclined and would fear that, then they're the ones who are going to sort of get the ball rolling for the book banning. It's not going to be the kids.
Indeed. And the majority of banned books in US public schools last year dealt with people of colour, LGBTQ plus people and other demographics, according to PEN America. Books that have been widely banned. In fact, the most banned book in the United States currently is Gender Queer, a memoir by Maya Kababe, frequently challenged and withdrawn from shelves over its illustrated depictions of gender identity and sexuality. All Boys Aren't Blue, a memoir manifesto. This book is gay by Juno Dawson. And I was like, oh my God, I know Juno.
Yeah.
Juno.
Wow.
She's so lovely. What do you mean banning Juno?
Banned.
Lawn Boy, Melissa, a middle grade novel about a young transgender girl. And I think, when you have minorities that are trying to speak their truth and you have lots of various stories that people feel uncomfortable with, to ban them whole spread means that A, you're not allowing parents any opportunity to interact with how they raise their children and how they introduce these very important topics, because the way that I will raise my children is going to be very different to you. Like my kids still giggle when Barry kisses me on the cheek.
But there is no one right way.
Indeed, I wouldn't want any books banned. I don't want them reading them.
Absolutely.
I'll be absolutely clear with you. My kids are really quite contained in what they read. But
you still don't think books that would
never
not be necessarily ones you'd want your kids to read would be banned or should be banned.
Isn't it an inherent right of a parent to make those decisions? And that's where we come to, like, yes, you've got religion. Yes, you've got culture. Yes, you've got the societal questions. But then we all think we should be free to practice faith and raise our children in the right way. And then books are being banned.
Yeah, it just doesn't make sense. But it's interesting that you mentioned memoir in terms of the books that have been banned in America recently, because I think it really brings to the fore a really interesting question about, when I think of one memoir that, has been hugely popular in recent times, is Tara Westover's Educated,
Yes.
which is a really, really brilliant book about life being brought up in a very, very strict religious family. And it really raises questions when it comes to memoir about who actually has the right to tell stories. Like, that is her story. And the question around it is like, who can actually tell the truth about their own life? And I think that's it's kind of a really unnerving issue to sort of think, well, you can't, isn't it?
Very much so. Why do banned books matter? It's an X-ray of societal fear. I mean, if you were a doctor looking at society, I would suggest you go to the arts and you look at what's being done in the world of arts. And
you can learn, I reckon you can learn so much about, if say you're a historian and you're going back through time, you can learn so much about what is going on in society through what is being read and I guess through what is being banned.
Definitely. Historically, the target shift from political dissent, sexuality, race, queerness, religion, educations, and children's autonomy. I think the question is, what happens when people start thinking for themselves? If literature creates empathy, that authoritarianism hates nuance.
I totally agree. But I also think that ultimately, when we say banning books, what we're saying is so much more than that. It's not just about the books themselves. You're banning thought, you're banning ideas, you're banning creativity. It goes so much further than the kind of the physical thing, that written 350 word piece. It's much more than that. And I think that's why it is so visceral and terrifying and actually gives us such an insight into a society. But I also think that books that are banned, unsurprisingly become books that people are so fascinated by and perpetually interested in. I think 1984, the fact that it's been a banned book is why so many people now continue and want to read it. The same with The Handmaid's Tale. I think the fact that they are so controversial is why people continue to love and read them.
No publicity is bad publicity.
Well, there you go.
And the best thing you can do for a book is ban it because everyone's going to want to read it.
Absolutely.
So this concept of reading as rebellion, we really hope that we've inspired you to look at any of these books in more detail. And when you're next thinking, what should I read? Just pick up Persepolis,
Pick up Charlotte's Web and tell me why you think it was banned. I still can't work it out. But any of these titles will just give you, I think, they're all brilliant reads.
They absolutely are. And if you've enjoyed this episode, please do subscribe and like and review. Let us know what you thought. And if there's any other topics or important banned books that you think we've missed, there were many, many to go through because unfortunately, so many books have been banned, but we wanted to pick out the key ones for us.
And give you a bit of variety.
Absolutely. We hope you enjoyed this episode.
Thank you for listening and see you next time.